This HOA, Karen thought she could steal my Tesla charger, threaten me with fines, and sabotage my property until her own greed literally burned her world down. I'm talking about the acrid stench of melting plastic, the sharp crack of electrical shorts, and the beautiful sight of a $60,000 Lexus becoming a bonfire because someone thought rules didn't apply to them. My name's Marcus, and after my divorce left me scraping pennies, I saved for 2 years to buy a used Tesla. Did everything legal, permits, inspections, the works. Then Bethany Klein slithered into the HOA presidency like a snake in a pantsuit. This woman had the audacity to demand free access to my charging station, then escalate to felony vandalism when I said no. Wire cutters at 2 a.m., check paint sabotage, double check. But when she finally tried to force her hybrid into my charger, well, let's just say karma comes with its own fireworks display. What would you do if your HOA Karen tried to steal your property? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, trust me. Every neighborhood has one of these power-drunk parasites. Let me paint you the picture of how this whole mess started. I'm Marcus Rivera, 45 years old, and after 20 years as a licensed electrician in Phoenix, I thought I'd seen every kind of crazy. Then my marriage imploded faster than a cheap Chinese circuit breaker, and suddenly I'm a divorced dad with 2 teenagers, living in a modest 3-bedroom ranch in Pinewood Estates. This place isn't exactly Beverly Hills. It's your standard middle-class HOA community where the biggest excitement used to be arguing about pool hours. Most neighbors are decent folks. Harold and June Peterson, the elderly couple who actually waves when you drive by, a young family with kids who leave chalk drawings on sidewalks, and working people who mind their own business. Monthly dues of $85 cover landscaping and keeping the community pool from becoming an algae farm. For 2 solid years after the divorce, I scraped together every penny. We're talking ramen noodles for dinner and the bitter taste of instant coffee becoming my morning cologne, because even Starbucks was a luxury. But I had a goal: buy a Tesla and stop feeding my paycheck to gas stations. When I found that 2019 Model 3, I felt like I'd won the lottery. Then came the real project: installing a proper Level 2 charging station. Being an electrician has perks, but I did everything legally: permits, inspections, proper GFCI protection. The rough texture of concrete still held my fingerprints when it cured, and that sharp ozone smell of fresh electrical connections meant freedom. That's when Bethany Klein slithered into my life like a designer heel-wearing tornado. Bethany, 52, had just won HOA President Unopposed Red Flag #1. She's a luxury real estate agent driving a leased Lexus ES hybrid, living in the corner mansion with magazine-worthy landscaping. Recently divorced herself, though unlike me, she got the better end of that deal. Word around the mailboxes was her settlement included some expensive private school payments for her college-age daughter. The day after installation, I hear the distinctive click-click of expensive heels on asphalt. Bethany approaches with that predatory smile real estate agents perfect for closing deals, but it gave me the same chill as hearing rattlesnakes in tall grass. Marcus, I love environmental consciousness in our community, she purrs, eyeing my Tesla like a hawk watching prey. It would be wonderful if eco-conscious neighbors could share resources. I explained residential chargers are designed for single vehicles' basic electrical load calculations, timing cycles, safety protocols. Her smile flickered like a failing fluorescent bulb. Think about property values. Community benefit. She made community benefit sound like she was doing me a favor by suggesting theft of my electricity. When I politely declined, that smile died completely. Suddenly it's all about aesthetic standards and architectural review requirements. The metallic taste of impending conflict filled my mouth. Here's where I made my first smart move: research. That night, I pulled up Arizona Revised Statute 33-1816-. Turns out the state explicitly protects EV charging installations from HOA interference. I also discovered our original covenants actually encourage renewable energy installations. Bethany either didn't know the law or was gambling. I wouldn't. 1 week later, an official HOA letter drops like a legal grenade. Claims my station violates non-existent aesthetic standards, demands $200 for architectural modification approval, threatens daily fines in 30 days. I called our management company. They had no record of any complaint. Called the city, all my permits were spotless. Called my attorney buddy Derek, he just laughed and said, "Sounds like someone's desperate for control." That's when the pieces clicked. Bethany wasn't just power hungry, she was financially desperate. Her real estate business was struggling, divorce settlements are expensive, and harassing neighbors was her way of feeling powerful when everything else was falling apart. But here's what she didn't know. I'd been dealing with bullies my whole life, from job sites to divorce court. And unlike her previous targets, I actually knew my rights, had the skills to document everything, and the stubbornness to see this through. Bethany Klein had just declared war on the wrong electrician. Bethany didn't waste time escalating her little power trip. 3 days after that first threatening letter, a second one arrives, this time with the aggressive tone of a loan shark's final notice. She's claiming multiple neighbor complaints about my industrial equipment disrupting the residential character of our community. Industrial equipment? We're talking about a charging station smaller than most mailboxes, but apparently in Bethany's twisted reality, it's the equivalent of setting up a steel foundry in my driveway. The real kicker? She's threatening to place a lien on my property for non-compliance and CC'd the entire neighborhood email list like she's announcing a block party. Nothing says professional HOA management like publicly humiliating residents over legally installed equipment. The acrid smell of my overheating printer filled the room as I made copies of everything 20 years of dealing with building inspectors taught me that documentation beats desperation every time. That evening, I did what any rational electrician does when facing bureaucratic nonsense hit the law books. Turns out my buddy Derek wasn't kidding when he mentioned Arizona's EV protection laws during our divorce poker games. Arizona Revised Statute 33-1816 reads like it was written specifically for situations like this. HOAs cannot prohibit electric vehicle charging stations on private property, period. Most states have similar laws because apparently power-hungry HOA presidents trying to block clean energy is a national epidemic. Meeting night arrives, and I walk into that musty community center armed with facts instead of attitude. The squeaky folding chairs and fluorescent buzz created the perfect atmosphere for bureaucratic theater. About 15 neighbors showed up, decent turnout for our usually apathetic community, though I suspect some came for the entertainment value. When Bethany calls for new business, I stand up and politely request to address her concerns. Her face goes through this fascinating color progression from surprise to annoyance to barely concealed rage as I read the relevant statutes verbatim, present my permits, and explain how residential EV charging actually works. These installations are specifically protected by state law, I conclude, and my permits confirm everything was done professionally and safely. Here's where Bethany revealed her true character. Instead of acknowledging the law or admitting her mistake, she erupts like a defective circuit breaker. "This is intimidation, hostile behavior," she shrieks, then storms out mid-meeting, heels clicking angrily across the tile floor like an angry woodpecker. The echo in that empty hallway perfectly captured how hollow her authority really was. Harold Peterson breaks the stunned silence. "Well, that was educational. Had no idea we had legal protections for that stuff." June nods and whispers. She's been acting strange since her divorce finalized. But Bethany's tantrum was just the opening act. The next morning, I'm enjoying coffee when a city code enforcement truck pulls up. An inspector gets out, clipboard in hand, looking like he'd rather be investigating actual problems instead of chasing phantom complaints. "Someone filed an anonymous report about electrical hazards and unpermitted work," he explains apologetically. After 15 minutes of checking my installation against code requirements, he shakes his head. "Sir, this is textbook perfect. Whoever called this in either doesn't understand electrical work or is deliberately wasting city resources." He hands me his business card with some free advice. Document everything. False complaints like this create patterns, and there are laws against harassment through government agencies. This isn't my first rodeo with vengeful neighbors. The neighborhood WhatsApp group starts buzzing like a disturbed beehive. June Peterson messages that she spotted Bethany taking photos of my charging station from the street with a telephoto lens, no less. The young family mentions they got a bizarre visit from Bethany asking if they've noticed electrical issues or strange smells from my direction. Even asked if their Wi-Fi was being disrupted by electromagnetic interference. Bethany's desperation reaches new heights when she calls the utility company claiming an electrical hazard that could affect neighborhood power. The utility worker who responds looks like he's dealt with 10 false alarms this week and has 0 patience left. Ma'am, residential EV charging is standard equipment. We install these connections daily. This is like calling us about a dangerous toaster. He examines my setup, nods approvingly, and delivers the same warning. Some people think harassment through official channels is consequence-free. It's not. That night, I started my documentation, system photos, emails, recorded phone calls, witness statements. My electrical training taught me that good documentation prevents accidents. Turns out it prevents frivolous lawsuits, too. The metallic taste of confrontation lingered, but I felt oddly calm. Bethany was following a predictable pattern. When legal authority fails, desperate people escalate to illegal harassment. I also discovered something interesting buried in our HOA Covenant Section 12.4 actually encourages renewable energy installations and environmentally beneficial improvements. Our original developer wanted this stuff. Bethany either never read our own rules or was gambling that I wouldn't. But this was just round one. Something told me Bethany's definition of desperate was about to get very creative and very illegal. Bethany's next move came with all the subtlety of a freight train wearing lipstick. I'm pushing my cart through the grocery store, debating between name brand and store brand cereal like any normal divorced dad, when she materializes beside me like a bad omen in designer athleisure wear. The cloying scent of her expensive perfume couldn't quite mask what I swear was stress sweat, apparently terrorizing neighbors burns more calories than Pilates. "Marcus, we need to talk," she announces, positioning her cart to block mine with the confidence of someone who's never faced real consequences. Privately. I keep loading groceries, but she's persistent as a door-to-door solar salesman. "Look, I have medical appointments requiring reliable transportation. Electric vehicles are better for my sensitive condition. We could split electricity costs 50-50, very reasonable." Medical condition? This woman drives a hybrid Lexus that probably gets better mileage than a Prius having an anxiety attack. But I'm curious where this theater production is heading, so I let her continue the performance. "If you won't be reasonable about community cooperation, there might be property value consequences," she whispers like she's sharing nuclear launch codes. "Real estate markets are very sensitive to neighborhood disputes. Litigation histories affect property values permanently. The threat hangs in the air thicker than the smell of rotting produce from the discount bin." I politely decline her generous offer to subsidize her transportation and push my cart away, but something in her tone screamed desperation louder than a smoke detector with dying batteries. That afternoon, I made the smartest investment of this whole ordeal, a comprehensive security camera system covering my driveway and charging station. 20 years of electrical work teaches you that problems rarely fix themselves. They metastasize until you cut the power to the source. The satisfying click of camera housings snapping into weatherproof mounts felt like installing insurance against crazy. Next, I did something that would prove absolutely crucial. Posted educational content about Arizona EV charging laws on our neighborhood Facebook page. Not inflammatory, not personal, just facts. For anyone interested in electric vehicles, here's what state law actually says about installation rights. I included links to relevant statutes and basic cost breakdowns showing how home charging saves serious money compared to gas stations. The response blew me away. 3 neighbors messaged privately about installation costs. 2 families with solar panels thanked me for the information. Even got support from Harold Peterson. Good to know our rights. Knowledge beats assumptions every time. It felt like accidentally starting a renewable energy revolution in suburbia. But Bethany couldn't tolerate peace breaking out. 2 days later, she appears at my door with an Academy Award-worthy performance about a family medical emergency. Her daughter was supposedly having complications at college, needed immediate hospital transport, but her Lexus was experiencing electrical issues, and she desperately needed my charger just this once. Here's where my good nature got the better of my judgment. I believed her. When someone claims medical emergency, decent humans help first and ask questions later. I provided my charging password and told her to take whatever time necessary. Her emergency turned out to be a 3-hour appointment at some luxury salon downtown. I know this because my newly installed security system captured her perfectly coiffed exit from that Lexus, looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover rather than out of a medical crisis. The footage also showed her photographing my charging station's control panel, testing different settings, and examining the electrical connections like she was planning a heist. The betrayal hit harder than expected. This wasn't about transportation or community spirit. This was about a woman who'd exploit fake family emergencies to manipulate neighbors. My mouth filled with that metallic taste you get when you realize someone's moral compass points exclusively towards selfishness. Bethany's campaign shifted into overdrive after her successful espionage mission. She filed complaints with my homeowner's insurance, claiming my charging station created neighborhood electrical hazards threatening property values. My insurance company investigated with the enthusiasm of professionals who handle frivolous claims daily, confirmed my installation exceeded safety standards, and essentially told Bethany to go chase parked cars. But she wasn't finished playing victim. Next came the community discord angle. Bethany started telling neighbors my refusal to share resources was creating property value concerns and liability exposure. She approached families with dire warnings about insurance complications and electrical fire risks from living near unregulated charging equipment. Here's what she didn't expect. Her harassment was backfiring spectacularly. More neighbors asked about EV benefits and installation processes. Harold mentioned Bethany's real estate business was struggling. Clients were avoiding agents with reputations for neighborhood drama. June shared that Bethany constantly complained about divorce settlement payments and her daughter's expensive college bills. I was watching financial desperation manifest as community terrorism. Bethany wasn't just power-hungry, she was financially drowning and using HOA authority as a life preserver, even if it meant pulling everyone else underwater. But harassing an electrician who documents everything is about as smart as using a metal fork to fish toast out of a plugged-in toaster. Bethany's descent into full-blown property sabotage started with the kind of subtle mind games that make you question your own sanity. I'd come home from work to find my charging cable moved slightly, wrapped differently than I'd left it. Not stolen, not obviously damaged, just wrong. Like someone had been playing with my stuff while I was gone, testing how much they could get away with before I noticed. The first time, I figured maybe the wind had shifted things around. Arizona gusts can move a lot more than tumbleweeds. But the second time, that familiar electrician's paranoia kicked in, the same survival instinct that keeps you from grabbing live wires or working alone around high voltage. Something was definitely off, and in my line of work, off usually translates to about to become very expensive and possibly fatal. Thank God for those security cameras. The footage from Tuesday night looked like a rejected scene from a low-budget heist movie. Bethany creeping across my driveway at 11:47 p.m. with a flashlight, examining my charging station like she was trying to disarm a nuclear device. She spent 20 minutes testing connections, loosening the protective cover, and generally tampering with electrical equipment she understood about as well as quantum physics. The infrared footage captured her frustrated expressions when she couldn't figure out how to cause obvious damage without leaving fingerprints all over her crime. But Bethany was a fast learner in the worst possible way. Wednesday morning, I discovered the charging station's weather cover hanging loose like a broken jaw, with several mounting screws mysteriously vanished, not fallen out from vibration completely missing. Someone had deliberately removed them, probably hoping Arizona's legendary dust storms would finish the demolition job and make it look like an act of God instead of an act of Karen. Time to escalate from documentation to actual law enforcement. Filing that police report for trespassing and property tampering felt like finally switching from electrical tape to proper wire nuts, a real solution instead of a temporary patch. Officer Martinez, who responded to my call, had the weary competence of someone who'd rather be chasing actual criminals than mediating suburban psychodramas. "You're Marcus Rivera, right? Second complaint this month about Bethany Klein," he said, flipping through his notepad with practiced efficiency. "She's called us 4 times in 6 months for noise violations that turned out to be kids playing hopscotch and neighbors using legal power tools on Saturday afternoons." He watched my security footage with professional interest. Textbook harassment escalation. Keep documenting, maintain those cameras, and consider a restraining order if this continues. People like this rarely stop until they face real consequences, usually the kind that involve court dates and legal fees. I shared the relevant footage on our neighborhood Facebook page, carefully and legally. Nothing inflammatory, just public safety. For everyone's security, please be aware that someone has been tampering with private electrical equipment during nighttime hours. Report any suspicious activity to local authorities. The community response hit like a flash flood in the desert. 3 neighbors admitted they'd witnessed Bethany's weird behavior, but hadn't connected the dots. Harold Peterson revealed she'd been harassing him about his woodworking hobby, claiming his weekend table saw violated imaginary noise ordinances. The young family shared that Bethany had interrogated them about their kid's swing set, suggesting it violated non-existent safety standards. But Bethany's creativity was reaching Olympic-level desperation. She called the state environmental agency, claiming my charging station was generating electromagnetic pollution that threatened neighborhood health. The poor agency representative who called me back sounded like she was reading from a script specifically designed for handling conspiracy theorists and concerned Karens. Sir, we occasionally get calls like this. Electric vehicle charging actually reduces environmental impact compared to gasoline consumption. Unless you're operating an industrial facility, there's zero regulatory concern here. When environmental terrorism failed, Bethany pivoted to tax fraud accusations, threatening to report me to the IRS for operating an unlicensed commercial charging business. Apparently, owning one charging station for one car now constituted federal tax evasion. The absurdity was reaching levels that would make a comedy writer weep with envy. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was turning against her faster than milk spoiling in August heat. People actively avoided Bethany at community gatherings. Harold Peterson revealed she'd been micromanaging everything from garden mulch colors to mailbox fonts, selectively enforcing imaginary regulations based on personal vendettas. Here's where my electrical background became crucial. Bethany was tampering with systems that could literally kill someone. Residential charging involves 240-volt circuits, enough electricity to stop a heart or start a house fire. Her ignorant meddling was creating genuine safety hazards while trying to manufacture fake ones. Derek, my attorney buddy, introduced me to a beautiful legal concept called tortious interference with property rights. Basically, you can't harass people for legally using their own property. Arizona protects renewable energy installations aggressively, and harassment carries serious civil penalties. The evidence was accumulating like storm clouds. Photos, videos, witness statements, documented false reports to government agencies. Bethany was building my lawsuit faster than I could have managed alone. But something darker was brewing in her desperation, the dangerous unpredictability of someone whose world was collapsing. The game changer came from the most unexpected source. Harold Peterson, shuffling across my driveway on a Thursday evening, clutching a manila envelope like it contained nuclear launch codes. The old man's hands trembled, not from age, but from the kind of nervous energy you get when you're about to blow up someone's world. His usual friendly wave was replaced by paranoid glances toward Bethany's corner mansion like he expected snipers on the roof. "Marcus, we need to talk privately," he whispered, gesturing toward my garage with the urgency of someone planning a prison break. "June found something at work that'll make your head spin faster than a busted ceiling fan." Inside my garage, surrounded by the familiar cocktail of motor oil and electrical ozone, Harold opened that envelope with the reverence of someone handling evidence in a federal case. What spilled out changed everything I thought I knew about this suburban war. Financial statements, official HOA documents, bank records that told a story uglier than a botched electrical job. "June works part-time for Peterson Property Management, our HOA management company," Harold explained, his voice barely audible above the hum of my garage refrigerator. "She's not supposed to share this, but when she saw what Bethany's been pulling..." He let the papers finish his sentence. The numbers hit me like grabbing 220 volts with wet hands. Our HOA had accumulated a $47,000 surplus from monthly dues and unused maintenance budgets, nearly 50 grand just sitting there while Bethany claimed we needed fee increases for essential improvements. That's enough money to install community charging stations for half the neighborhood. But here's where it gets criminal. Bethany had authorized a $12,000 legal consultation payment without board approval or homeowner notification. The recipient? Morrison and Associates, the exact same law firm handling her bitter divorce proceedings. She'd literally embezzled HOA funds to subsidize her personal legal warfare. "Gets worse," Harold said, producing another document that made my electrician's brain short-circuit. Buried in our original HOA covenants, Section 4.7 contained explicit language about renewable energy encouragement and environmentally beneficial installations, not just tolerance active promotion. Our developer had specifically wanted solar panels, charging stations, and green technology. The revelation struck like discovering you've been reading electrical schematics upside down for 20 years. Bethany hadn't just been wrong about the law, she'd been systematically violating our own community rules while stealing money to pay lawyers who were probably buying boats with our dues. June's inside information revealed Bethany's true desperation. $31,000 in credit card debt with minimum payments devouring her shrinking real estate commissions. Her divorce settlement demanded monthly payments for her daughter's elite private college payments she'd been missing like a drunk electrician misses wire nuts. Real estate license renewal requires expensive continuing education, Harold added with grim satisfaction. June overheard her begging creditors for extensions, promising payments she can't make. The power dynamic flipped, like throwing a main breaker. Bethany wasn't just controlling, she was financially drowning, using HOA authority as psychological life support while her existence disintegrated. The harassment wasn't about charging stations. It was about maintaining the illusion of power when everything else was collapsing. Harold dropped the final bombshell. Annual HOA elections were next month, requiring only 5 homeowner signatures to force a vote. Given current neighborhood sentiment, Bethany's dictatorship was about to face democratic consequences. "I'm running against her," he announced with the confidence of someone holding 4 aces. "One last thing," Harold said, producing the coup de grace. Original covenants require 75% homeowner approval to ban renewable energy. We only get 68% meeting attendance. Even if she wanted to change rules, she lacks the votes. Staring at those documents felt like finally finding the main electrical panel after fumbling in the dark. Bethany had been operating without authority, embezzling community funds, and enforcing imaginary regulations. Victory tasted metallic and electric. But this revelation meant Bethany's desperation would reach dangerous new heights. The next 48 hours felt like assembling the most satisfying electrical project of my career. Except instead of wiring a house, I was building a coalition to take down a corrupt HOA dictator. Harold Peterson's bombshell revelation had given us the ammunition. Now we needed a battle plan that would make Sun Tzu proud. Harold agreed to run for HOA president with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting years to clean house. "I've watched this community slide into petty tyranny," he said during our first strategy meeting in my garage. "Time to restore some sanity around here." June Peterson became our inside source at the management company, carefully accessing HOA financial records that painted an increasingly ugly picture of Bethany's embezzlement. 2 years of unauthorized legal consultations, inflated maintenance contracts awarded to companies owned by her real estate associates, and expense reports that would make a mob accountant blush. Derek, my electrician buddy turned legal advisor, offered technical expertise and connections in the trades community. "This isn't just about your charging station anymore," he pointed out while reviewing our evidence files. "This is about protecting every homeowner's right to improve their property without harassment from wannabe dictators." Our unlikely alliance expanded when the young family with kids, the Johnsons, joined after Bethany criticized their children's sidewalk chalk art as defacing community property. Apparently, even hopscotch squares were now considered vandalism in Bethany's twisted interpretation of HOA authority. The legal strategy crystallized around multiple fronts of attack. Derek explained the concept of tortious interference with property rights. Essentially, you can't harass people for legally using their own stuff. My documentation of Bethany's harassment campaign, combined with evidence of her financial misconduct, created grounds for both criminal charges and civil lawsuits. Here's something most people don't know. HOA management companies are required by Arizona law to provide complete financial records within 10 business days of any homeowner's written request. If irregularities are discovered, homeowners can force forensic accounting at the HOA's expense. June's access to internal documents was helpful, but we needed official records that could stand up in court. We organized the neighborhood like a precision electrical installation, every connection planned, every circuit protected, every system designed for maximum efficiency. I created a private Facebook group for affected homeowners, documenting Bethany's pattern of selective enforcement and harassment. Within 3 days, we had 7 families ready to challenge her authority. The technical education campaign became crucial for building community support. I prepared detailed analyses showing how residential EV charging actually works, the minimal electrical impact, the environmental benefits, the long-term cost savings. Most neighbors had no idea that home charging typically costs less than $50 monthly for average driving. compared to $200 plus for gasoline. Derek helped me install backup security systems covering every angle of my property. Motion sensors triggered smartphone alerts for real-time monitoring, creating an early warning system for Bethany's increasingly erratic behavior. The psychological effect was just as important as the practical protection, knowing I had comprehensive documentation made sleep possible again. Our timing strategy focused on the upcoming annual homeowner meeting in 3 weeks. Arizona HOA law requires simple majority of attending members to elect new leadership, but getting people to actually show up takes serious organization. Harold began personally visiting every household, explaining the financial irregularities and building support for reform. The community benefit angle became our secret weapon. Instead of just opposing Bethany, we proposed positive changes using the $47,000 surplus she'd been hiding. Community solar project to reduce everyone's electricity costs. Electric vehicle car sharing program for interested neighbors. Educational workshops on renewable energy incentives and tax benefits. June uncovered another crucial detail. Bethany's real estate license was up for renewal in 2 months, requiring continuing education courses she couldn't afford and ethical standards she'd been violating. Her harassment of potential HOA clients was creating liability issues for her brokerage firm. We prepared multiple contingency plans like backup electrical circuits. If the election failed, we'd file formal complaints with state HOA oversight agencies. Civil harassment lawsuits were ready for filing simultaneously. I'd even briefed a local TV investigative reporter who specialized in municipal corruption stories. Each alliance member had specific roles based on their strengths. Harold served as the public face of reform, leveraging his 20-year neighborhood reputation. June provided financial intelligence from inside the management company. Derek offered technical expertise and contractor connections. The Johnson family handled social media organization and neighbor outreach. The evidence organization required the same attention to detail as wiring a complex commercial building. Chronological timeline of harassment incidents, spreadsheet documenting financial irregularities with supporting documentation, compilation of security footage showing property violations, and witness statements from affected neighbors. The smell of fresh coffee filled my garage during our late-night planning sessions, mixing with the familiar scent of electrical components and the metallic taste of impending justice. Every document organized, every strategy refined, every contingency planned. Bethany had declared war on the wrong neighborhood. Now she was about to discover that electricians don't just know how to wire houses, we know how to build networks that can power entire communities. Bethany's next move crossed the line from harassment into felony territory with all the finesse of a chainsaw performing brain surgery. I came home from a long day rewiring a commercial kitchen to find my charging cable severed like a snake that had met a very angry lawnmower. Not just unplugged or damaged, completely cut through, with frayed copper wires exposed like sparking nerve endings. The sight hit me harder than accidentally grabbing a live wire. This wasn't vandalism anymore. This was potentially lethal sabotage. Those exposed 240-volt wires could have electrocuted a child, started a house fire, or caused a neighborhood power outage. The acrid smell of burnt copper hung in the desert air like a warning of what could have happened if someone had touched those wires. My security cameras had captured the whole midnight performance in crystal-clear infrared detail. There was Bethany at 2:17 a.m. creeping across my driveway with wire cutters like some kind of suburban terrorist. The footage showed her testing different cutting angles, struggling with the heavy-gauge cable, and actually kicking the severed pieces in frustration when they didn't create the dramatic spark she'd probably expected. This wasn't just property damage. This was premeditated destruction of electrical infrastructure that could have killed someone. My hands shook with rage as I called 911, not for the property loss, but for the sheer recklessness of someone tampering with high-voltage systems they understood about as well as quantum mechanics. Detective Rivera, no relation, despite the name, arrived with the weary competence of someone who'd seen every flavor of suburban insanity. She examined the severed cable with professional interest, noting the clean cuts that indicated deliberate sabotage rather than accidental damage. "Ma'am, this is felony property destruction," she explained while reviewing my security footage. Tampering with electrical systems also carries reckless endangerment charges. Someone could have been seriously injured or killed. The evidence was overwhelming. Receipt timestamps showed Bethany had purchased those specific wire cutters the day before the incident. Even better, She'd thrown the receipt in her own trash, which technically became public property once placed on the curb. Her explanation to police that she was testing neighborhood security as HOA president sounded about as believable as claiming she was conducting nuclear physics experiments. I posted the security footage publicly with a safety warning that spread through social media faster than electricity through copper wire. Danger. Someone has deliberately cut electrical cables in our neighborhood, creating serious safety hazards. Please keep children and pets away from any damaged electrical equipment. The community response was immediate and volcanic. Parents were horrified that someone had created genuine electrical dangers while children played nearby. Harold Peterson called an emergency HOA board meeting before I even asked. The Johnson family started a petition demanding Bethany's immediate removal from any position of authority. But Bethany's desperation had reached levels that would make a cornered rattlesnake look rational. When County Inspector Williams arrived to investigate her latest false complaint about unpermitted electrical work, she was waiting in my driveway like an ambush predator. The poor man barely stepped out of his truck before she launched into a frantic tirade about neighborhood safety and electrical code violations. "Ma'am, I've inspected this installation twice already," Inspector Williams said with the patience of someone dealing with his 10th crazy person this week. "Everything is properly permitted, professionally installed, and completely up to code. Filing false reports is a misdemeanor offense." Bethany's response was to argue with a licensed county official about electrical codes she'd obviously Googled 5 minutes earlier. Watching her lecture a professional inspector about electrical safety while standing next to the cables she'd illegally severed was like watching someone explain fire safety while holding a lit match. The legal machinery was finally grinding into motion with the inexorable force of industrial equipment. Derek filed formal harassment complaints with the county district attorney's office. Restraining order applications included comprehensive evidence of escalating property crimes. The footage of Bethany with wire cutters was served to her at her real estate office, creating the kind of public humiliation that destroys professional reputations permanently. Financial pressure was mounting on Bethany like water behind a failing dam. Her real estate license was under formal investigation for ethics violations. The management company had received multiple homeowner complaints demanding her removal. Her divorce attorney was reportedly demanding payment for those HOA consultations that had never actually involved HOA business. Media attention started building like storm clouds over the desert. Local TV reporter Janet Hernandez contacted me after the police report became public record. Bethany's refusal to comment, combined with her threats to sue the news station for harassment, only made the story more compelling. Social media picked up the narrative as HOA Karen Goes Too Far, complete with memes featuring her security footage. The neighborhood was organizing against her with the efficiency of a well-designed electrical grid. 15 families had joined our reform coalition. The petition to remove her from office had collected enough signatures to force an immediate board meeting. Annual meeting attendance was expected to triple as word spread about her financial misconduct and dangerous behavior. But I could sense something darker brewing in Bethany's increasingly erratic behavior. The unpredictable desperation of someone whose entire world was collapsing faster than a house built without proper electrical grounding. Bethany's final act of desperation arrived with all the subtlety of a lightning strike hitting a power transformer. I woke up at 12:47 a.m. to the sharp buzz of my phone's motion alerts, followed immediately by the acrid chemical smell of paint fumes drifting through my bedroom window. Nothing good ever happens when you smell paint at midnight in the desert. My security cameras captured what looked like a scene from a psychological thriller. There was Bethany, standing in my driveway with a gallon of white latex paint, methodically pouring it over my replacement charging station like she was baptizing it in suburban vengeance. The infrared footage showed paint cascading over the electrical housing, seeping into connection ports, and pooling around the base in a way that would make any electrician weep. The sight of someone deliberately destroying electrical equipment with conductive liquid made my blood pressure spike faster than a short circuit. Paint and electricity mix about as well as water and live wires, which is to say, they create expensive disasters that can kill people. She wasn't just vandalizing property, she was creating genuine fire hazards while recording herself doing it. I called 911 immediately, catching Bethany red-handed literally. When Officer Martinez arrived, she was still on my property, still holding the empty paint can, with white latex covering her hands and clothes like evidence at a crime scene. The woman actually tried to claim she was documenting safety violations, while standing next to equipment she'd just contaminated with potentially conductive material. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for criminal mischief, trespassing, and violation of your restraining order," Martinez announced with the satisfaction of someone finally able to apply real consequences to months of escalating stupidity. The booking photo that leaked online within hours showed Bethany looking like she'd wrestled with a paint mixer and lost decisively. But arrest wasn't enough to stop her complete psychological meltdown. From jail, she posted a rambling Facebook rant that read like the manifesto of someone whose grip on reality had snapped like an overloaded circuit breaker. She claimed to be the victim of eco-terrorism intimidation and neighborhood conspiracy, promising lawsuits against everyone who'd opposed her reign of petty tyranny. The community response was swift and merciless. 23 homeowners showed up for the emergency HOA meeting Harold had called a record attendance that filled our little community center beyond capacity. The musty smell of rarely used furniture mixed with the electricity of righteous anger as neighbors shared stories of Bethany's harassment campaign. The vote to remove her from the board was unanimous, not just majority but completely unanimous. Even the two households that had previously supported her threw her under the bus faster than you could flip a circuit breaker. Watching grown adults cheer the removal of a neighborhood tyrant was more satisfying than completing a perfect electrical installation. Legal momentum was building like pressure in an overloaded electrical system. The restraining order was granted based on escalating property crimes and her arrest for violating the temporary order. Criminal charges now included felony property destruction, multiple counts of trespassing, and reckless endangerment. My civil lawsuit for harassment and property damage was moving forward with the inevitability of electrical current following the path of least resistance. The media circus reached full intensity when Channel 7 News ran their investigative piece. HOA president arrested for Tesla charger vandalism. Bethany's mugshot became a local internet meme, with captions ranging from "When Karen goes too far" to "Paint job gone wrong." Her real estate license was suspended pending the ethics investigation, and her insurance company dropped her coverage faster than touching a live wire. The financial consequences were cascading through her life like a power surge, destroying everything in its path. The HOA management company terminated their relationship over liability concerns. Her divorce settlement was threatened by mounting criminal legal costs. Several real estate clients pulled their listings after the news coverage, claiming they couldn't work with someone facing felony charges. Paint damage assessment revealed the full scope of her destructive stupidity. The charging station was completely unusable, with paint having infiltrated every electrical component and voided all warranties. Professional remediation costs exceeded $2,500, not including the safety inspection required before any electrical equipment could be reinstalled. She'd essentially totaled a charging station with a gallon of house paint. But Bethany's final threat came the next day when she violated her restraining order by approaching me at work. Desperation had stripped away any pretense of sanity as she demanded I drop all charges or face consequences that would make my life hell. She threatened to use her real estate connections to destroy my business reputation and ensure I'd never work in this town again. The irony was beautiful, a woman facing multiple felony charges threatening someone who documented every crime she'd committed. Derek immediately filed additional restraining order violation charges, and the judge increased her bail while ordering psychological evaluation. Harold Peterson was elected interim president unanimously. The HOA voted to return Bethany's embezzled legal funds to the community treasury. A resolution supporting renewable energy installations passed without opposition. The neighborhood transformation was already beginning, but I could sense Bethany had one more desperate card to play. Something that would either end this nightmare or make it spectacularly worse. The annual HOA meeting that would end Bethany's reign of terror was shaping up to be the neighborhood event of the decade. Our little community center hadn't seen this much excitement since the great pool chlorine shortage of 2019. 47 homeowners packed into a space designed for 20, with local TV news crew filming from the back and 2 police officers stationed near the entrance, partly for crowd control, mostly because everyone expected Bethany to do something spectacularly stupid. The air buzzed with anticipation thicker than electrical current through copper wire. Folding chairs squeaked under the weight of neighbors who'd never attended an HOA meeting in their lives but wouldn't miss this showdown for anything. The musty smell of rarely used community furniture mixed with the metallic taste of impending justice and about 6 different types of nervous sweat. I'd prepared a comprehensive presentation covering the timeline of harassment, financial misconduct evidence, and community impact documentation. Charts, graphs, security footage highlights, everything needed to demonstrate how one person's power trip had terrorized an entire neighborhood. Harold Peterson introduced me with the formality of someone presenting evidence at a war crimes tribunal. That's when Bethany made her dramatic entrance. Despite the active restraining order explicitly prohibiting her from approaching me or my property, she burst through the community center doors like a one-woman tornado of desperation and designer athleisure wear. Her appearance was shocking, hair disheveled, makeup smeared, clutching a folder of evidence with the manic intensity of someone whose psychological moorings had snapped completely. "This is illegal," she shrieked, pointing at me with a trembling finger. "Marcus Rivera has orchestrated a conspiracy to destroy my life. He's turned this entire community against me through lies and manipulation." Officer Martinez stepped forward immediately. "Ma'am, you're violating a court-ordered restraining order by being here. You need to leave immediately." But Bethany was beyond rational thought. "I have presidential duties. This is my community. I've protected property values and maintained standards while he's been installing dangerous equipment and threatening neighborhood safety." I continued my presentation while she ranted, letting her own behavior demonstrate everything I'd been documenting for months. The security footage of her cutting electrical cables played on the screen while she screamed about being the victim. The irony was so thick, you could cut it with wire strippers. The evidence shows a clear pattern of harassment, property destruction, and financial misconduct, I concluded calmly. This isn't about charging stations. It's about one person abusing authority to terrorize neighbors who wouldn't submit to illegal demands. Bethany's response was to storm out of the meeting, declaring she'd show everyone who was really in the right. Through the windows, we watched her march toward the parking lot with the determined stride of someone about to make a decision that would define their legacy forever. That's when she spotted my replacement Tesla charging station, freshly installed and gleaming under the parking lot lights like a technological beacon of everything she'd failed to destroy. What happened next will live in neighborhood legend forever. Bethany dragged her Lexus hybrid over to my charging station and began attempting to connect it with the fury of someone trying to prove a point that existed only in her fractured mind. The problem? Her hybrid used a completely different charging protocol than Tesla's system. Forcing the connection required bypassing multiple safety mechanisms designed to prevent exactly what she was attempting. "This equipment is dangerous!" she screamed at the gathering crowd of homeowners and news cameras. "I'll demonstrate the safety hazards everyone's been ignoring." She jammed the connector into her vehicle's charging port with enough force to override the safety lockouts. Warning lights started flashing immediately. The charging station's computer began its emergency shutdown sequence. But Bethany, in her infinite wisdom, decided to force the connection by holding down the emergency override button while the system tried to protect itself. That's when the magic happened. The electrical mismatch between her hybrid's charging system and Tesla's protocol created exactly the kind of catastrophic failure that safety systems are designed to prevent. Sparks erupted from the charging port like a 4th of July finale. The smell of burning plastic and electrical components filled the air. Then, in a crescendo of poetic justice that no screenwriter could have imagined, her Lexus hybrid's battery caught fire. The paint fumes from her previous vandalism had apparently settled into the vehicle's ventilation system because the fire spread faster than gossip in a small town. Within minutes, her $60,000 symbol of suburban status was a blazing monument to the consequences of desperate stupidity. Fire department sirens wailed as 47 homeowners stood in stunned silence, watching Bethany's final act of harassment literally go up in smoke. She was transported for smoke inhalation and shock, muttering something about sabotage and conspiracy even as her own recklessness burned before her eyes. I addressed the crowd while firefighters extinguished the smoldering remains of Bethany's pride. This is what happens when obsession with control destroys judgment. I'd be happy to help any neighbor transition to electric vehicles safely, emphasis on safely. The standing ovation lasted longer than the fire. 3 weeks after Bethany's automotive fireworks display, the neighborhood felt like someone had finally fixed a flickering light that had been driving everyone crazy for months. The acrid smell of burnt Lexus had faded from the community center parking lot, but the memory of watching karma deliver a personal performance would last forever. Bethany's legal consequences arrived with the reliability of a well-wired electrical system. She pleaded guilty to multiple criminal charges to avoid jail time, but the financial penalties hit harder than any prison sentence. $8,500 in restitution for property damage, legal costs, and community remediation. Her real estate license became permanently revoked after the ethics board reviewed her greatest hits compilation: midnight wire cutting, paint vandalism, and financial embezzlement. The woman who'd terrorized neighbors over electricity bills now faced bankruptcy from her own electrical stupidity. The civil harassment lawsuit settled for $15,000, enough to install charging stations for 3 more neighbors and fund my kids' college books for the next semester. More importantly, the restraining order remained active for 2 years, meaning Bethany's reign of suburban terror was officially terminated with extreme prejudice. She moved out faster than electricity through a short circuit, selling her corner mansion at a devastating loss. Last I heard, she'd relocated to some apartment complex in Scottsdale where HOA presidents have actual oversight and can't embezzle funds to pay divorce lawyers. The poetic justice was so perfect it could have been scripted. Harold Peterson's election as permanent HOA president was more landslide than contest, unopposed, unanimous, and celebrated like a championship victory. His first act was adopting our renewable energy encouragement policy, transforming our HOA from an obstacle into an example other communities started copying. The neighborhood transformation exceeded everyone's wildest expectations. 7 families installed EV charging stations over 6 months, creating a quiet network of overnight charging that slashed carbon footprints and monthly expenses. 3 households added solar panels after seeing long-term savings calculations. Our community became a sustainable living showcase, featured in the Arizona Republic's environmental section and studied by urban planning students. Monthly HOA dues dropped 40% after Harold eliminated Bethany's creative accounting and phantom consulting expenses. That hidden $47,000 surplus funded real improvements, upgraded pool systems, LED lighting conversion, and drought-resistant landscaping that looked amazing while saving water. My weekend EV consulting business exploded beyond anything I'd imagined. Derek's referrals alone kept me busy every Saturday, and word of mouth spread faster than gossip at a block party. Fighting Bethany had awakened talents I didn't know existed: community organizing, renewable energy advocacy, and apparently the ability to turn neighborhood terrorism into profitable business opportunities. The kids were proud their electrician dad had outsmarted the crazy HOA lady and improved their community. Teenagers actually bragging about their parents is rarer than finding perfect wire management in an old electrical panel. We established the Green Technology Scholarship, using recovered embezzlement funds $2,000 annually for students studying renewable energy or environmental engineering. Harold and June's granddaughter won the first award, heading to ASU for electrical engineering with plans to make neighborhoods better, like Mr. Marcus did. Community healing was visible in daily moments. Pool gatherings became informal EV meetups where neighbors shared energy tips and group buying opportunities. The annual block party evolved into a sustainable living fair with solar demonstrations and energy-efficient appliance vendors. Property values increased 12% the following year, not from Bethany's imaginary aesthetic standards, but from actual renewable energy systems and our reputation as a well-managed, innovative community. Buyers prefer neighborhoods known for progress over those famous for housing wire-cutting domestic terrorists. But here's the beautiful irony. Last month, I got a call from a homeowner in Kansas whose HOA president was targeting his solar panel installation with the same harassment playbook Bethany had used. Apparently, power-hungry HOA Karens are a national epidemic, and my story had spread through social media to other victims seeking justice. Sounds like Karen has a sister in Kansas, I told Derek. Looks like I might need to expand my consulting services. The metallic taste of confrontation had been replaced by the satisfaction of community leadership and the sweet smell of desert mornings without gasoline fumes. Most importantly, I learned that patience and persistence always defeat petty tyrants, especially when you document everything and know your legal rights. Remember, your HOA dues aren't their personal piggy bank, and renewable energy installations are protected by law in most states. Drop a comment sharing your worst HOA horror story, and don't forget to subscribe to HOA Stories for more tales of neighborhood justice and Karen comeuppance.